Hey, this is Jamie from Stonemaier Games, and today I'm going to talk about character creation in tabletop games in particular. This is a topic that's been on my mind a lot recently. I've been working on a game that involves characters, where each player embodies a character in the game, and I've kind of been questioning some different methods for how players could create that character or not create that character. I think there's some viable options here. And specifically when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about character creation that happens before the game begins. It might involve game mechanisms, but it might happen before the game begins. Not where you create the character during the game. There are many games where you're kind of leveling up the character or enhancing them, growing them, giving them equipment, stuff like that, where you're defining their story or who they are during the game itself. This is character creation before the game. And one of the inspirations for this was a game called RoboMon. And I should really put that as, yeah, I'll put RoboMon first. I'm going to jump around to a bunch of different games, some that I've played, some that I haven't played. But my friend Gabe Barrett, game designer Gabe Barrett from Board Game Design Lab, is working on this game called RoboMon. And he put out a video, I'll put a link in the description below, recently showing that him and his daughter creating characters for their RoboMon game. And you can watch the video. It's very charming as they go through the character creation process. And it made me wonder, how important is this to the game experience? And I know I'm sure it's perfect for RoboMon. I'm not judging it in any way. I'm kind of asking, should I be thinking about this? Because it looks really cool to create your own character at the beginning of the game. And one of the downsides, well, not downsides, one of the elements that I think you have to keep in mind if you want to do some character creation is that it can involve some legacy elements to it. In RoboMon, if you look at the video, they are putting stickers on a little sheet of paper and writing on the piece of paper. And so they're permanently changing that piece of paper in the game to add a name to that character. They're using stickers to define what the character looks like. And so I don't think RoboMon is going to classify itself as a legacy game, but those are legacy mechanisms. When you are taking a component out of a box and permanently changing it, that is at least a light legacy element of the game. And so do you want to do that? Do you want to have that element in a game of permanent changes? But it can be very powerful as well, I think, to do that. I'm going to jump around a little bit in this video, so be prepared for that and jump around to different topics. But I guess let me start by saying the three different categories, and then I'll give some examples of games in these different categories. The three different categories I see of character creation, if you are going to have players embody a character in the game, are one, you can have pre-built characters. So you can not do character creation. You can have pre-built characters that have their own histories, names, backstories, things like that. I'll talk about pros and cons of that in a second, and examples of that. Two, going up a level, you can have character creation where you're combining a few different elements and kind of mashing them together to form a character. So these are often things that elements that already exist within the gaming space. You're just kind of putting them together. Like maybe you're putting two mats together. That would be a very simple version of this. And then the next level, the highest level, is that you are creating the character from scratch. You are naming them, you are defining what they look like, you are giving them traits and characteristics that have mechanical implications in the game itself, strengths and weaknesses, and maybe even their backstory itself. You are defining all of those elements of the character. So let's talk about some examples. The first one I want to mention is not a specific game, but if you play video games, and I do not play many video games, but if you do, you know that there are many games that have character creation at the beginning of the game, where you are defining the character's hair color, their eye color, what they look like, what they're wearing, what culture they identify with in the world. Their strengths and weaknesses. Maybe you're even starting them down some sort of a character or skill tree at the beginning of the game, but during the character creation process. Sometimes you're defining their class. And many games have you define a class, and that is your class for the entire game. Or you can start out with some class bonuses, but also develop other benefits from other classes as well. So video games do this a lot, and I think it's fairly easy for video games to do this. Not easy to do, but I'm not quite sure what the right word is here, but easy isn't the right word, because I know it's very difficult to do all that programming. But what I'm talking about easiness is that it's very easy to reset a digital game and start over with a new character. And so you don't have to worry about these legacy elements that I'm talking about if you want to have full customization for a character. And it also doesn't mean that you have to have a giant book or a giant pile of cards. It's all stored in the digital system. You can just flip through it and pick what you want. But we're talking about tabletop games here, so how this is implemented in different tabletop games. One of my favorite games that uses character creation, or could use it, is Role Player Adventures. This is a cooperative, not role-playing game, a cooperative adventure game with a lot of narrative, and you start off by making a choice. And that choice is either which pre-built character do you want, which is the choice that we chose when we played through our campaign of Role Player Adventures, and I'll explain why in a second. Or you can play a game of Role Player, the normal Role Player game, beforehand, and then port a character from Role Player into Role Player Adventures. And this is where I think it's kind of notable. That's what I thought I was going to do when I sat down to play Role Player Adventures. I thought I was going to port over a character, and even in preparation, leading up to when I was going to play Role Player Adventures, in the months leading up to it, I played Role Player several times. I took photos of the character that I made at the end of the game, and I was pretty sure I was going to bring one of those characters into Role Player Adventures. But when I opened up the Role Player Adventures box, I found that they had this big stack of cards of pre-made characters with their own completely unique backstories and pictures and identities and traits and characteristics. And I was just enamored by the number of choices there and the number of interesting characters that already had stories going on. And I found that was more compelling for me than my own character that I built. And so this is kind of a big topic of this video. This is one of the things that has made me doubt whether I want to pursue character creation in the game versus having an existing character with their own name, with their own history, where they're from, their own backstory, their own motivations, and their own mechanical traits and characteristics that have a mechanical impact on the game. All of that to me was really, really interesting because I wanted to delve into that character. I found all these interesting characters. I wanted to choose one and embody that character and make choices through that character's eyes, and maybe through my eyes too, but also through what that character wanted in the game, rather than build something myself. That to me was more interesting in Role Player Adventures to do that. I like that they gave you the option of choosing the two, and maybe that's a key conclusion. Maybe that's a potential conclusion here, not a key conclusion, but maybe a game could offer you the choices of pre-built characters versus building your own character. I think that could be a viable option. But it was just really notable to me that I was excited to build my own character, use a character that I built by playing a whole game of Role Player. But instantly when I opened the box and I saw those new characters, I was like, these look so cool. I want to play with one of these characters. Yeah, that was just notable to me. On the opposite end of the spectrum is another game that I really love that has fairly robust character building, and that is the Legacy of Dragonholt. Legacy of Dragonholt is another narrative-driven game. It doesn't really use the tabletop surface all that much, though there is a town map that you can use, or that you should use during the game. But at the beginning of a game or a campaign, really, of Legacy of Dragonholt, you'll choose your characters. I think they call it a race. I think that term is changing in terms of maybe how they identify culturally. I'll call it a race because I think that's how the game does it. A race, you can choose a gender if you want. You choose a name. You choose different traits and skills. A class. You choose all these things you come together. I haven't played Dungeons and Dragons, but I have a feeling it is fairly similar to that. Maybe distilled, streamlined a bit. But you're choosing all these different elements of your character, and that was a lot of fun. And yeah, I enjoyed that part of it. Of defining what made my character unique. But also as part of that, I would say it was fun to read through the different races in the book to see what made them unique and important, because I think there were some inherent mechanical skills and abilities that came with each race, and that was interesting for me to learn. So to not start completely from scratch, but to have something pre-built there, even when I was doing a lot of character building, I thought was really, really interesting and fun and compelling in Legacy of Dragonholt, rather than creating something out of thin air. Another game that I'll mention here that I have played is Cthulhu Death May Die. And so this uses the mashup method a little bit more, where there are some preset things and you're just pushing them together for the current game. In Cthulhu Death May Die, you have a character, you have a character sheet that has different ways that the character can level up. That's the sheet itself. That's the upgrade sheet. You have the character card, which has a unique ability for that character. And then you have, I think it's called a madness card or something like that, a sanity card that gives the character a unique ability or a unique detriment related to when they go a little insane in the game, when the madness takes over their mind. And so I believe it is 3 different moving parts here that you're combining together. But and so that is the character creation process. You're defining the character through this mat and those 2 different cards in the game itself. And I think this is a really nice middle ground, because you can do that randomly if you want. You don't have to think about it at all if you don't want to. You can randomly assign all those things. Or you can kind of build your character based on those preset things. So you have some information to go by. You might not know a lot about the game, but a character might look cool. Let's say you might choose that character. However, that character already has a name. They already have a story. So you're not entirely building that character from scratch. Same with the Madness card. You could choose from among Madness cards that look interesting to you, either thematically or mechanically. And then there's the upgrade sheet. You can choose something that looks interesting there. Combining those 3 different things together, I think is a nice middle ground for character creation. Gloomhaven. I have some other examples that tie back to that in a second, but I'll go in order of the list. As I typed it out here on my screen, Gloomhaven is another game where there's a little bit of character creation. I don't recall. I played both Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion and the normal Gloomhaven. And from what I recall, a lot of the character creation happens during the campaign itself, not at the beginning of the game. Rather, Gloomhaven is more focused on giving you this really interesting, unique character that you haven't seen before in more traditional fantasy worlds. And you are learning about that character's kind of cultural identity and what's motivating to that character itself. That to me is really interesting and similar to the role player adventures method. Pandemic Legacy is an interesting one, because in different Pandemic Legacies, there are different things that you do at the beginning of the game or the beginning of the campaign to define your character. Typically, you're mostly just naming that character. But I believe, if I can remember, in Season 0, you are also applying some stickers to your passport, which is your little player book, passport book, at the beginning of the first game. But that passport might change throughout the game. You might change, and I know I'm not talking about character creation throughout the campaign, but I think it is notable that you're kind of dressing yourself up in a special costume at the beginning of the Pandemic Legacy campaign, but later on you can add other costumes and other faces to that character basically as the campaign proceeds. So I thought that was pretty clever for them to do in Pandemic Legacy. It's more cosmetic than anything else, at least at the beginning of the campaign. Arkham Horror LCG, I can't speak much to that, but some ambassadors mentioned this as one where you are changing your character and creating your character a little bit. I think that mostly has to do with the deck construction element of Arkham Horror LCG, where you're kind of defining your character's deck every time you play. There's also Call to Adventure. I've not played Call to Adventure in a long time, so I don't remember how much character building happens before the game versus during the game. I think that is largely a game similar to Role Player, where you are defining your character's story during the game itself, not before the game. Fiasco, another game that I've only played once. I don't remember much about the character building in that game, but ambassadors reminded me that it does happen there. Forgotten Waters is an interesting one. It's been a while since I played that one as well. Forgotten Waters is a pirate-themed game where your character does have a story that you are learning about the more you play. I don't remember much about the character creation, though, other than the name creation process, which I thought was really clever in Forgotten Waters, where you're picking a pirate name, and you can pick any pirate name you want, or you can use their pirate name generator, where I believe you're rolling some dice, but they basically created this long list of words that mash up together to form great pirate names. I really like that they gave you the list of words to choose from, to choose those names, rather than having you pull a name out of thin air. So I think that is really cool. One common theme I'm returning to here is giving some flexibility in the character creation, but giving players preset things to choose from and to mash together to create that character. I think that is my preferred style of character creation. Journeys in Middle-earth is another one where I believe you're combining 2 different types of cards, and even more exemplified, I think, is Marvel Champions, where you're combining 3 different decks of cards to form your character deck. Again, I think this is a great method where these decks are already preset. They're preset by, I think, maybe it's trait, class, and the character itself in Marvel Champions, and you're choosing these mini preset decks, and you're shuffling them all together to form your deck for that game. I think that's a really clever way to go, because that way you don't have to fully understand like this trait deck, but you might say, okay, I want to be Spider-Man this game, but I want to be feisty, and so I want to choose the feisty deck, and I also want this other class deck. I don't remember what those are. But combining those preset elements together in a way that you almost get to discover who you are as you play, I think that is really, really cool in Marvel Champions. Some games that I haven't played yet that use character creation are RoboMon, Too Many Bones, Folklore, The Affliction, Waste Nights, Tales from the Loop, Runebound, Talisman, Chronicles of Avel, and Dungeons and Dragons. And I want to talk about those last two a little bit. I have played a role-playing game, the Star Wars role-playing game, many, many years ago, but I haven't played Dungeons and Dragons. But my understanding of it is that a lot goes into the character creation process at the beginning of a Dungeons and Dragons game or campaign. And I think that can be a really fun part where you're kind of defining who your character is and choosing from all these different skills and abilities. And I think there is an appeal to that, to look at a big character sheet and see all the things that you could be and to choose things that maybe reflect who you are in real life or maybe are very different than who you are in real life. But having that checklist of abilities, I think, is really, really satisfying. Or the beginning of a skill or tech tree for your character. I think that can be really appealing. But Chronicles of Avel is one that I haven't played yet, but I think this is another one similar to RoboMon that kind of inspired this list because I saw a lot about the character creation process in Chronicles of Avel, some of which happens during the game. But the game does something really, really cool where I believe it uses a dual layered mat and it gives you kind of the shape of what your character is. And you use oddly shaped tiles and insert them into that character space if they can fit. Either before you play or while you play. I don't know if it's either or just while you're playing itself. But I like the idea of taking these tiles that aren't permanent and fitting them into your character to define what your character is. I think that's a pretty cool thing. And I think part of it actually is choosing like your character's face, your body shape, things like that. I've seen certain games do that where you're mashing up a different face, a different body type, different arms, things like that. It doesn't always come together in a cohesive whole, but it can give you that feel of character building right from the start, where you have this kind of misshapen character, but that gives them personality right from the start. Just to come back to the core elements here, I talked about the idea of starting a character and not building a character, but the appeal of having a pre-built character that you can embody as you play. I think there is a certain appeal to that. Like I mentioned in Role Player Adventures, I think that's a completely viable way to go. The middle ground method of having a few preset things that you choose to combine together, like Marvel Champions, like Cthulhu Death May Die. I think that's a very viable way to go as well. And then starting from scratch, starting from nothing and kind of building your character based on what you want them to be, based on a long checklist perhaps, or stickers, or anything or choosing their name. I think choosing their name, I think we found in legacy games, can be a very, very powerful thing to choose someone's name. And I guess this brings me back to the game that I'm working on, which I can't talk much about yet, but whether or not I want players to completely create that character before the game versus having a preset character that has a story that you can kind of learn a little bit about, learn about that character, and advance that story as you wish during the game itself. And I think I lean a little bit towards that. I lean towards the middle ground method of having you choose a character and maybe you choose a starting objective and maybe a starting item, and to mash those things together. I generally like that idea of mashing a few different things together that are preset. And maybe the game could even say, like, this character typically starts with this item, but you could choose a different item if you want. So this character that normally focuses on this one thing could also now focus on this other thing. I think that there's some appeal to that as well. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't have a conclusion here of one thing that is better than the other. I just wanted to kind of lay out the options and what various games do, and I wanted to get your thoughts on character creation. Do you enjoy that character creation process at the beginning of the game, or do you enjoy the middle ground option of just mashing a few different things together, or do you prefer it when games just say, okay, these are the characters that you can choose from, and learn their stories, learn about their backstories, learn about their motivations, and embody them as you play. Do you have a preference here? Do you have a preference for different games? I'd love to hear your thoughts and examples in the comments below. Thanks.